siege tank, and then just some Vikings added in. However, we're not seeing that in this series. It's definitely been epic. A lot of people complain that TVT is boring, but this series definitely not.
Definitely the most interesting mirror matchup in StarCraft 2, in my opinion, because TVT has the potential to evolve into a higher level, get to the late game, and obviously there's always the option of going nuclear when your opponent has a lot of tanks on the ground. So here we go. It looks like Gretorp is ready, and I'm interested to see what map he's picked. He has picked Metalopolis, and we should be ready to go in just a few minutes in game number 3. It is going to be the conclusion between Gretorp and Silver. I'm so excited to see who's going to come out ahead. And I got to say, Silver had great multitasking. He was able to drop in multiple positions. He put a dropship into the main, and then he came forward with his frontal attack and, you know, just split the attention of his opponent, Gretorp.
And it's really important to note that with that multitasking, he was still able to win on both fronts. And so sometimes when you're trying to multitask too much, it gets out of control. You lose. You can't focus exactly where you need to. That really shows Silver multitasking ability, which is what you need in TVT especially. I think in a lot of Protoss matchups, you don't need that multitasking ability as much. It's more about getting the perfect unit composition. But in this TVT series, definitely multitasking has paid off in both games. And so I'm just waiting to go ahead and get invited. The map does look like it's going to be Metalopolis. So that is going to be pretty interesting because one thing is it's going to come down to spawn locations and seeing what build they go, because Reaper is very effective on this map depending on the spawn locations. And we have seen Reapers in the previous games, so we could potentially see that. Or we could see the standard, you know, siege tank and Viking. Although the thing about this map is there's not a lot of wide open spaces. There's 2 main lanes to go. So it'll be interesting to see which way these players decide to go. And we are going to go ahead and get this started. The countdown has begun. I hope you guys are ready for this because this is it, man. This is the last game for whoever's going to get knocked out into the losers bracket as we are in winners round 2. And, yeah, just waiting for it to load up.
All right, so game number 3 between Gretorp and Silver here on Metalopolis. Like you said, a lot of different potential openings for Terran versus Terran. Never quite sure what they want to do. And here we go. Gretorp going to be spawning as the red Terran down at the 7, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock position on Metalopolis. His opponent going to be Silver at the 2:30 position over on the other side of the map as the blue Terran. So I'm excited to see who's going to come out ahead. Obviously, momentum favoring Silver, but the map slightly favoring Gretorp because he chose it. But this map Metalopolis, so many players have played it. It's really quite standard. The positions they've spawned in are very distant, so I'm not expecting to see any kind of a, you know, proxy barracks or Reapers or any kind of a really fast, cheesy opening or anything like that. So I think it's going to be pretty standard.
Absolutely, and like you mentioned, it is important to note that players are familiar with this map. This is a day 1 map. The first day of the beta come out, best day of my life, but this map was there. And so players have probably played thousands of games on this map. It is almost in every single tournament, but there's a reason for that. It is a good, solid map. And so we're going to see if anyone has a specific build in line for this map or not. Do note though, Gretorp once again grabbing his early gas right after that supply depot, and I'm assuming Silver's going to go more standard and throwing down his barracks, which is basically what we've seen in these previous games. And so they're not altering their builds. They just want to stay in the zone, play the game they know. They're obviously comfortable going against what their opponent is doing. So it's again just going to come down to, I think, a macro fest, but who can control, and that positioning is what we got to watch out for. I know I'm just kind of driving that into the ground, but that is what's really cost players both these games.
Well, it's an important point to drive because positioning in Terran versus Terran is all the key elements. I mean, not only positioning, the last thing you got to remember is gas. Gas in Terran versus Terran, just like in humans versus humans, you need that oil, you need that gas to run your economy, and gas is always the limiting factor in Terran versus Terran. So Gretorp here has opened with an earlier refinery that obviously gives him the possibility of getting a faster tech lab down or going straight for the factory. I think we're probably going to see the factory as he's just now going to get 100 gas right when the barracks finishes, and I think he is going to pump out a factory, and yeah, there goes the, oh, it looks like we're going to, yeah, there we go, a factory going down. Silver going to see it with his SCV, so he's obviously got great scouting in there. And meanwhile, Silver is opening standard, nothing too out of the ordinary, so we'll see what happens.
You know, Gretorp actually hasn't began his orbital command yet. There we go, just now starting it. He opted to actually squeeze out 1 additional SCV, which is really a preference thing. It could affect his build quite a great deal, though, because since he is getting that refinery so early, not going to have as many early minerals to get the orbital command at exactly when a normal Terran would get it. So his is going to be a little bit delayed. That's not a huge deal. He did absolutely plan to do that. That was not an error on his part. However, Gretorp doesn't look like he's going to get any scouting in as the 2 Marines almost actually killing that that SCV. It does look like he will make it home safely. And do note that Gretorp, being the good player he is, didn't just click the SCV in his base, as the Marines on the high ground would have been able to snipe it. So it's just little stuff like that you can use to not have yourself get behind in the early game. And it does look like the factory is almost going to be done now for Silver, throwing down a second Rax as well. And then once again, there's the starport on the way for Gretorp. So this is what we've seen from him before. Is he going to get a Banshee, though? I mean, at this point, it's kind of predictable.
Yeah, I think 1-1-1 opening, very easy, very standard for any Terran player to do, and Gretorp is obviously going for that starport. He has a tech lab building on the factory. A great comsat going down by Silver, though, is obviously going to reveal Gretorp's intentions here, which is going to be a fast Banshee out of that starport. So we'll see if Gretorp decides to change it up now. It looks like he isn't. He's just going to land it down. I mean, not much variety you can really do at this point. And it's really interesting to note that Silver here is throwing down one additional barracks. So he's not going just purely all the way to starport. He's actually going to get an additional barracks down and try to get a couple more Marauders than his opponent. So obviously Silver really likes Marauders in TVT. He's not the biggest fan of going mass mech, but we will see some kind of a biomech combination, I think, from Silver. But he is going to definitely have a lot of Marauders versus his opponent Gretorp.
You know, honestly, I think that going that Marine Marauder build is a little bit easier to let you focus on doing other stuff, because you don't have to be constantly unsieging your army, because if you unsiege at the wrong time, it is over. With Marine Marauders, it's all about trying to find the right angle to attack at rather than the perfect position to defend from. And so now the Banshee is out. I'm really surprised to see Gretorp get this again, because not only was it scanned, but he got it in both the last games. And so if Silver would have just got a Viking, he would have been fine. However, he is getting a bunch of Marines, which is good. It's just that Banshee slightly outranged the Marines, so sometimes there's a nice little sweet spot where you can micro and kill those Marines very efficiently, but that is going to have to be a lot of micro, considering, let's see how many Marines we got. Yeah, we have 10 Marines here, so he should be fine, and his supply depots are placed in a way that he can easily defend them from that Banshee. And right there, yeah, Gretorp's going to back out. I don't think he's going to be able to do too much here.
Silver also throwing down an auto turret right behind his mineral line, and auto turrets can't shoot air, of course, going to ward that Banshee away. I really like what Silver did here. He initially was going to try to pump out some early Marauders, but he changed it up a little bit, got more Marines in response to seeing that starport, seeing that tech lab. But here's what Gretorp likes to do. He gets that early expand out. He's got the command center already morphing into the next orbital command. He's got that saturation running. SCV count about the same, but we're going to see Gretorp just spike a little bit higher because he got that command center slightly earlier. Silver, in response, is just now building his command center. So he's always been down in economy in the early game, but somehow manages to get back in. So I'm interested to see when that's going to happen. He's got more Marines. I think he's got a slightly larger army, whereas Gretorp is going to have to play defensive, and he's thrown up a bunker at his front door. Get the Marines inside the bunker, get a siege tank, siege it up, and he should be just fine.
It is very interesting to see these different playstyles of these players rather, because that command center, not only is it later, but it's also going to have to fly like it's traveling the Oregon Trail to finally get to this expansion. And I've said it before, but every second he doesn't have a second orbital command, that energy for the mules is just going up and up and up for Gretorp. Now Gretorp once again is opting to get these siege tanks, so it almost seems like we're seeing, it almost seems like these are the builds that these players practice. This is exactly the kind of builds they want to stick with, and since both players are confident, I think we will see a pretty epic game here, unless someone makes a huge blunder, because I can't imagine Silver marching in here with just a couple of Marines and breaking this, especially with that bunker there, and there will be siege tanks, I'm sure, on the high ground. He's got to scan that, realize, I don't know if I can quite break that. He may go for it. I don't know how it would work unless he can position his units perfectly. I don't know, though, that he will be able to, as Marines are very, very squishy. They will die instantly, and apparently stemming up over here, not sure what these guys plan to do, just at a range, actually, of that siege tank, although there is enough units to clean this off, and somehow, yeah, that got absolutely owned. So I don't know what that was, but it was not a success.
Not a success at all. Mission failure. Silver here is actually getting combat shields for his Marines. It seems like he's really dedicating to getting just pure Marine at this point. I can't quite agree with this, though, because Gretorp's got siege tanks. Siege tanks just obliterate Marines. It's not even a chance in hell. So really, right now, he needs to get more Marauders. He needs to pump Marauders to deal with the siege tanks. Looks like a dropship getting warded away from the Viking Gretorp has inside the main base. So nice little defensive maneuver there, as Silver's going to be forced to fall back. His Marines and mobility with dropship strategy is not quite working working out against Gretorp. Gretorp's got him a little bit figured out here, and he's playing very defensively. His income is also 10 harvesters higher than Silver's is, so really Gretorp a great macro player, maybe even I would say slightly better than Silver is, and Silver is trying to find some kind of avenue to attack at, but he just can't find that jugular yet. He's still searching.
Definitely more of an aggressive style here from Silver. And again, those combat shields, I think what he's going to try and rely on is a very, very lucky drop. I mean, it is difficult to guard your entire base, especially on this map, Metalopolis, because there's so much surface area that those units can, that the medevacs can basically drop. And if those Marines do get inside the main, then you know what, that it can be a lot of trouble.
There's actually a lot of barracks going down here for Gretorp, who is now starting to transition to a mass bio army on the ground. I thought for sure he would more likely focus on tanks. One really interesting thing about this TVT is we're not seeing much Vikings, if any at all, just a handful for each side, and that's interesting. And I guess that's because both sides have decided not to go for mass mech, not decided to go for mass siege tanks, and that's where you really need Vikings, because Vikings help to spot the mech. Instead, Gretorp has, I guess, switched up his strategy a little bit. He's focusing more on biomech. He's throwing down a lot of barracks here, all of them with tech labs, and this is going to be huge. He needs to get some research, though, for his